So, Lewis, what has begun must be finished. Folly! Do you know how much we had to sacrifice to unify Valois? That's how politics played, a game of appearances. Allies come and go. What truly matters is preserving the agents of change, for it's to us alone that the direction of all things have been trusted. Thus spoke Heather. You underestimate me, dear Lustava. My position is not one of weakness. The Emperor himself, enemy of the cause, is close to my spears. Of so many magistrates, he felt compelled to intervene personally. And why? Isn't that proof of his despair? He fears defeat. He knows that the lions are approaching to devour his flock. He realizes that the only way to stop us is to stand in front of me. One misstep for the bear, and we'll leap at his throat to teleport. I underestimate you with absolute certainty, Sir Lewis. No one shall face the Guardian and prevail, not even those most steeped in knowledge. And let me add this, meet him on the field, and he shall break your teeth. Silence fell. The breeze blew across the meadows. It subliminally carried the undescribable horrors of the August of war. The knight Le Routillant broke the silence. Let us stand firm. You're not unwary. The cause will prevail, for it bears the enlightenment of the peoples. But when it comes to the strategic variables, let us exercise prudence. Our allies in Raskia already tremble at the mere sound of the Imperial cavalry hooves. It will take but little for them to scatter once the violence resumes in the cities and villages. Let us do as leader Lustava wisely counseled. Execute the strategic maneuver northward, postponing our plans for total victory and leaving a number of key strongholds in the hands of trusted names of the revolutionary cause. We shall forego a swift triumph, but only for a brief season. Sir Louis stared the knight Le Routillant in the eyes, trying to read his deepest intentions. No one escaped his inhuman readings. Do you remember Regent Jacques, Honorable Sir Guy? Yes, my lord. Remind us how he died, ordered Sir Louis. Yes, my lord. Regent Jacques, once the ruler of the populous city of Leclerc, had committed suicide in his palace after the Republican victory. We were his enemy. He fought us fiercely. He went all the way in that conflict and hanged himself, for we took the castle from him. His own men betrayed him, for they were loyal only to Gord. The mercenaries' cause is money. I was in the exact moment when everyone thought otherwise. I was faster, bolder, and more fearless than all my enemies. The alliance of brave men with enlightened hearts had always been enough to ensure my victories. I confess we have done no more than the robe itself could have achieved. Yet, we would surely have turned its execution to political ends. I advanced only as far as the enlightened truth of the cause permitted me, and all who believe in it followed after me. I shall make it plain to you, from the lowliest to the wisest among you, that for me and my faithful there is no returning, nor ever shall there be. For her, my greatest of beloved, I would journey to the very ends of the earth for the sake of her radiance. For her, the greatest of my beloveds, the world entire, or nothing at all. The breeze hit the castle walls, creating a horrible noise. The army received marching orders. At sea, the knights of Meteos launched their fleet, 300 ships. The duty was to support the land army. They would sail in assault toward Tairen, an island under imperial control to the west, there to engage the dreaded Vassilian fleet. Their plan was to lure the enemy into a narrow strait, thus avoiding encirclement. Yandrach considered the order to attack Tairen a grave risk. Yet, he was loyal to Sir Louis with such unwavering devotion that he would obey his commands to the bitter end. In general, Captain Yandraksh vehemently rejected the notion of a final offensive against Raskia, but it was of paramount importance that it proceeded, for if left unengaged, the Imperial fleet could disembark in the rear of the army at Rador. Even in the face of distress, Yandraksh motivated his men to believe in victory. For southern Raskia, Seleucus had plans to extend his chevauchés, that is, his brutal war of extermination. Nothing and no one opposed to the enlightenment of the cause would be allowed to survive. He would reach the city of Lisht at the pace of utter destruction in short order. He also calculated that the news of the siege of Lisht would force the emperor into a rash and predictable move. The castle and Rador would be left to their fate, as he could not afford to leave any significant garrison behind. Yet, depending on the campaign's course, the defeat and consequent morale collapse of the revolution's enemies might suffice to discourage any further actions against allies' positions. It would take but the emperor's head to secure a place in the Hall of the Greats. The fortress of Zviv would likewise be left undefended. It was no secret that the balance of power tipped in favor of the emperor. He had numerical, logistical, and time advantages over Seleucus and his loyal army. The wise Eleusteva would not help in battle, as they had a non-aggression pact with the emperor. They would only lead, nothing more. He considered the odds 3-1 against him, and indeed, from that perspective, the offensive seemed utterly mad. Yet he clung fiercely to his maxim, "As long as I still command my cavalry, the line between victory and defeat will remain perilous thing for my wretched enemies." Guy Beclair led the charge. They followed the rules of the chevauchée to the letter. They plucked canals, raised the crops, and set the hovels ablaze. Under the threat of apocalypse, the Starosts begged for mercy on behalf of their people. None was granted. The knights under Sir Guy Beclair massacred every living soul from Nienna to the Vesta woods. The local militias, in the face of the massacre, attempted to fight back, but no resistance held. The cities that had bowed to King Marko Lizic's dominion were placed under siege. Visegrad and Bezazhlodna did not withstand for long. Both fell after 3 days of fierce combat. The proud citizens also tasted the Generalissimo's knight's particular style of war, etching to history a crimson chapter with the utter destruction of their cities. Indeed, after 2 weeks of campaign, all of southern Raskia, save for Lisht, had succumbed to the Lecraline lances and swords. Blood had overflowed in such torrents that the enemies of the revolution could no longer feel any confidence in merely waiting. Seleucus had granted his captains the order of occupation. No village that failed to meet the established productivity metrics was to be allowed to exist any longer. The cities of Visegrad and Bezazhlodna, during the period of occupation, were to remain under strict martial law. A rigid quarantine was to be imposed on every district in order to prevent the spread of plagues. As for the final and most challenging step towards victory, Seleucus declared that no wall could contain the flames of the revolution, and that the gallows of history awaited the dissidents. At Fort Begosh, a small imperial garrison guarded the Via Recta, 300 Stekoi, expeditionary soldiers. The intelligence reached Seleucus, who immediately ordered an assault. The Stekoi held out behind a palisade for 2 long days, until their lines finally broke and they surrendered. The laws of war granted the unconditional right to show clemency to surrendered soldiers. Proclaiming the irrelevance of faith in the popular Lecraline regime did not exceed the bounds of mere propaganda. For in the absence of gods, men fall back upon the field of law. The accumulated articles of the established popular constitution were sacred material to the faithful of the revolution. To breach the very limits one has imposed upon oneself is the greatest challenge a tyrant can face. Yet, Sir Lewis was resolved. Recourse to audacity was his greatest trump card. He dispatched execution orders laced with radical sentimentality. The soldiers were sentenced and hanged in full view of the walls of Liszt. Now the army encamped before the new capital. Its walls seemed unsurmountable, as though forged by the gods themselves. There was no need to take it by force. They had only to wait for the fruit of the provocation to ripen. Sir Lewis had climbed a hill to the right of the fort. With him came Vishkan Rativin and Stef Boras. The three stood in silence, gazing out over the devastated horizon, shrouded in darkness. "I have no interest in granting mercy," Sir Lewis declared abruptly, turning to his companions. "I trust you are fully aware of the consequence of our actions. Let me be clear. We're outbound to whatever outcome fate had in store for us. I committed myself early to the cause. From the moment I ascended to the heights of power, I knew this day would come. The enemy, our great enemy, now stands before us. I will not rest until I have slain him. Now the thought occupies my mind. In the days to come, it will be I and my knights wallowing in the mud of defeat, or the guardian himself. There is no other possibility, no other path, nothing. Therefore, I ask you sincerely, tell me what is happening in your hearts. Do you have what it takes to follow me to the end?" A moment of silence, while the death-laden breeze swept across the blackened plains. "From the moment I bent my knee to you, I bowed my will to the designs of the messenger. Something as fleeting as my life falls short of the magnificent cause. Yes, my lord, I would follow you, but the declaration of faith was interrupted by the sounding of a trumpet. Like a ghost rising from the ashes, a knight rode with his lance raised. His colors were visible at a distance. His image had caused horror in the three who were gathered. He was summoning death, uttering the name of Sir Lewis. Clad in remnants of metallic chainmail, he was wrapped in filthy rags that fluttered wildly with his speed. He rode a black steed, guiding its sinuous, almost serpentine curves. Though he was but an apparition, the lance he carried was unfortunately all too real. It was aimed straight at the Generalissimo's heart. Through his mind flashed the countless wars he had waged, the families he had torn apart with the conspiracies and plots, the endless crimson images of blood flowing from the wounds he had opened, all in the name of the cause. Why such a tragic end? He did not delve into the vanity of life. There was no more time. He drew his sword. Vishkan Rativin and Stef Boras followed him. The ground shook with the approach of the night. He seemed to come extremely slowly. The ray of sunlight reflected off the tip of the spear. The emotion he felt when looking at her surprised him. He felt the fear of death. A terrible cold ran through his body. His fingers loosened, and the sword slipped from his hands. He considered the idea of regret to be miserable. He feared judgment. He felt very afraid and cold. Of everything, he thought of Clara. He wished he had spent more time with her, his second most beloved. Now it was of no use. He would never have a pleasant time with anyone. Everything went dark. It only became clear when he heard a cry of agony, like a star cracking and the violent fall of the horse. The night had come close, so close he had focused entirely on Sir Lewis, and did not see Vishkan Rativin's sword. The sword cut the exposed legs of the animal, causing it to fall atop its master. He regained consciousness, as if emerging after a long dive. He was sweating coldly, shivering violently, feeling nauseous, but he was still breathing. The ghost lay beneath his injured mount. It groaned in pain, the horse crushing it. Vishkan Ratvin approached to support his liege, but he freed himself and went to retrieve the fallen sword. He picked it up and kissed its richly inlaid pommel. Minutes or hours had passed. Sir Lewis couldn't say. He was still pondering what had happened. The agonizing moans of the fallen cut him out of his trance. In the distance, the Chevalier were coming. They must have heard the fall. Lewis approached the fallen man and questioned him. "By whose command?" "The banner," stammered the ghost. Lewis then looked at the banner thrown to the ground. He recognized it. It was neither imperial nor from openly hostile houses. It was the Phoenix of the Dudich, one of the houses most aligned with the revolution in Raskia. "Why?" "For Daniel, you bastard. You did it." "Well?" "Thomas Dudich, I thought you would live up to the symbol of the Phoenix. Carry it on your banner, that you would wield wisdom. But choosing to come here, to Lyme, you have become the most foolish of all in your house, masquerading as the image of this vile ghost, raised by the rancor of the war." It was indistinguishable. What had come from Thomas Durich's lips was laughter or tears. But he said, "No, this is your end, Anti-Rex. The sorrow is entirely on my family for having believed in your cursed words. Dushan was right about you. It was possible to know deep down. We just wanted to deceive ourselves. The price was high. The share of your revolution is death, Daniel. But now he's here, in Lishtri. He has broken your hideouts. He will defeat your army. It is the end, Anti-Rex. Well, now that I came here for this exact reason, I will kill him myself. When the spears turn to his back, it will be mine that pierces him. I fear that after this act, I will not remember Dudich in pious form. I find it amusing to inform you, before your death, that I will cut down every one of your family, greater or smaller, as I did with Daniel Dudich." When the conversation was over, Sir Lewis pierced Thomas' chest with his sword. The Emperor descended the stairs. The echo of his footsteps reverberated off the walls and plunged endlessly downward. He continued to the deepest level of the dungeon, where the worst offenders were sealed away, those who posed any true threat to the king's peace. He came before a massive metal great door, sealed by great chains of steel that were paradoxically intertwined. It was a magical portal, older than the dynasty of Raskia itself, or the very walls of the city of Lishtr. He stood alone. In recent days, he had already endured more than enough of his magistrates and generals. In any case, none could aid him in this endeavor. He judged that solitude would serve him better. He carried a key, yet he hesitated at first to turn it in the lock. After regaining his composure and steeling his heart, he proceeded. Gripping the ruby-encrusted head, he inserted it into the mechanism and turned. The door's ancient magical wards hummed life. Of their own accord, the chains loosened and fell away. With a terrible, bone-rattling groan that seemed to reach into the bowels of the world, the relic door swung open. No man would go down there, facing the absolute darkness. But the Emperor was no ordinary man. He knew that in the shadows, nothing had the authority to even scratch him. He lifted the candelabrum he had brought with him with his left hand and moved forward. The echoes of his footsteps hang definitely against the sepulchral silence that enveloped everything. The stench of rot stilled vile visions, conjuring in his mind images of the very worst. He passed cell after cell that had long seen nothing but rats. In some lay the skeletons of soul long exiled from the memory of the living. No man deserved such a fate, the emperor judged. He pressed on through that accursed place, the candelabrum casting a narrow pool of light. The flame was not enough. He could see only 3 paces ahead, the rest swallowed by deepening shadow. It felt as though those darkness were not a mere absence of light, but all goodness itself. Now and then he stumbled over something unseen, yet the true horror was the loathsome presence that clung to the place. He could hear faint rustlings in the distance behind him. At first, he thought then sparks from the candelabrum's flame, but to his horror, there were not. Pale shapes flickered at the edge of his vision, indistinguishable save for the surrounding blackness. Suddenly, the emperor halted. A voice from a cell to his left addressed him. He turned, raising the light toward the sound. There, at last, he found the one he sought. Behind the bars, a woman lay chained to the wall. Her skin was unmistakably brown, her hair curly black. They were disheveled and covered her face. "The light," moaned she. "I cannot extinguish it," answered the emperor, impassive. "Would you leave me blind because of your fear? I stayed here with them, in the abyss, not being like them, for years. Why would it be fair for you not to stay for a few moments?" The emperor still watched, the pale movement from the corner of his eye. He didn't put out the candelabrum, but placed it at a certain distance so as to provide some light. "Shall we talk now?" She shook her head, revealing the previously hidden face. Her expression was mixed, leaving the opinion of her beauty into the man's judgment. Her eyes carried the bitterness of hopelessness. "What brings you here?" "What else would I come for in this place, if not to have a conversation with you, Giovanna?" A strange agitation ran through her, impossible to decipher why. "Giovanna, is this really my name?" she said, confused. Yes. She had opened and smiled. It was filled with disdain. "Did you come seeking my help, noble sir? Know that I have been offered something similar in the past. I'd rather become one of them than grant you anything." "I did not say I came here for your power, sorceress, but for a conversation. Whatever comes of it, so be it." Silence fell. Small, hurried steps could be heard in the distance. The emperor gazed into her eyes. At first, they seemed sad, a big mistake. They took on a deadly poison that hid beneath the guise of a victim. They assumed the shape of inexplicable hatred. The sounds of footsteps seemed to intensify all around. Anyone at that moment would have broken the exchange of glances. But the Imperial Guardian was not just anyone. He knew what was happening. She took him for Dushan, the Raskian king, whom she held responsible for her imprisonment in the Varhev dungeon. She was wrong in her judgment, for the one who was there was far greater. He endured the silent threats of the wretched witch, until she herself broke the silence. "I will listen to you if you give me something," Giovanna said slowly and deliberately. "What would that be?" "Clear up for me. Who's winning the war?" "Us." Now there were no more curtains. The hatred was deadly, open, and expressive. She seemed to want to tear her interrogator apart with her own hands if she didn't ask, "Who are you?" He stared at her for a long time, while watching her writhe in contempt. He saw in her the bubbling deceit from years of captivity. They also felt the force emanating from the sorceress. A terrible agitation seemed to take over the environment. Force imposed itself upon the one who had come where the light was blocked. But being a being of such greatness, not even the stones of the ceiling would dare to harm him. "I am a leader of men, king of unremembered times, conqueror of lands and hearts, the one who sits at the edge of the world to behold it, the light that terrifies the darkest corners of the earth, emperor of the south, guardian of humanity, Amarius V. How did you live within for so long?" Giovanna didn't answer. She didn't need to. "How did you know I was alive?" "I simply didn't know." "Is he alive?" "Dushan." "No." "Did you kill him?" "No, I didn't kill him." "How did he die?" "In combat." "I'm sorry this happened to you, Giovanna." "Be quiet," said the witch, seriously. "Still, I'm sorry. No one deserves such a punishment. And I admitted the whole truth. I knew you were alive." "What?" Giovanna said, intrigued. "I am aware of your strength. I have heard stories about it." I did not doubt them. "I was the pride of the sisters, the most esteemed among all. But the years have consumed my desire to wield magic. I apologize for letting it sleep, Master of the South." "You did not disappoint. Before my eyes, I have the proof of your resilience, Giovanni Liari. You have exceeded my expectations so much that I desire to use you." "So that's it," said the witch, laughing. "For a few moments, I was able to believe that a majestic prince had come to my aid." The witch laughed even more. "Of course not. I came first to talk," said the guardian, interrupting the witch, scorned with an imperious voice. "Second, to set you free. As I said, no one deserves such a fate. The use of your strength comes as an offering, and it's up to you to accept it or not." "So you are more foolish than I ever thought. Free me? Like this?" "No, no, guardian. There were concrete reasons why Dushan imprisoned me here. I am neither good nor fair, much less trustworthy. Moreover, guardian, I am tied to Sir Lewis. I serve only him. Apparently the mold had stuck in your brain, sorceress. Don't you know that Dushan was my ally? I didn't kill him, nor any of my allies." Giovanna shuddered. "The Republican officers have always envied me for who I was, for having gained such an influence over Lewis. I would expect nothing less from those dogs." The Emperor, who had been crouched until then, stood up. He took the key with embedded rubies out of his pocket again. He stuck it into the lock and turned it. He entered the cell, approached it slowly, and crouched in front of the sorceress. She cast him a frightened look, not out of mere physical fear, but because she sensed what might come next. From his pocket, the emperor pulled out a crumpled document. It was a royal edict. He held the edict at a readable distance for the sorceress. The document contained words that were not difficult to understand, but hard to accept. The most striking proof of the betrayal was the unmistakable signature of the Supreme Commander, Republican Knight Sir Lewis. Below the signature was the date of issuance. Liar, fraudulent forger, artisan of lies, master of deception, her tears, heavy with anguish, ran down the dark cheeks of the suffering woman. It took her time to believe, to recognize that, besides being wronged, she had been betrayed, now possessing a shattered heart. I believe you have been wise enough to have posted someone associated with Dushan in the Starosti of Lishtr. Marko Lizic is the one who governs the city, a great friend. The guardian made a gesture, and the sorcerer stopped. Then he turned to the shadows. He could not see, but felt their gaze. I proclaim the time of your suffering to be over. I address you as someone close to Khanet, who I served for a next cycle. Go now, your torment has ended, said Emperor Amarius V with an imperial's voice. He heard whispers, but they grew weaker until they vanished forever, leaving the chambers of Varhev's dungeon in eternal silence. The pillars of the ethereal prison that held and collapsed. The decay of those pits was swept away. No one ever shall walk this path, said the Emperor, throwing the ruby key into the abyss. For the first time in a long while, Giovanna saw the sunlight and felt the warmth of the day. She was traversed by the long-considered lost feeling of joy. The contrast of the cold underworld with the surface was enough to fill the emptiness. She was aware of what was happening in the world. The Emperor admired her, for at least someone could convey happiness. Waiting for him at the top of the tower were his trusted men, Marcus, along with 7 more men of the Varangoi. Your Imperial Majesty, it is such a pleasure to see you again. The same to you, Decurion. It feels wonderful to feel the light. Did you not find it, Your Majesty? It is true that much time has passed. The absence of light corrodes the soul. It was impossible. A mix of horror and surprise covered the soldiers' faces when they saw the figure of the sorceress appear behind the Emperor. So she leaves. But how? Said the Decurion, horrified. This is not the time. There is much at stake. The Emperor turned to Giovanna Lari. Will you do as you promised me? I will. Marcus, yes, Your Imperial Majesty, summon Marko Lizic and make it clear to him the urgency of his coming to me today at the Citadel. As Your Imperial Majesty wishes, said Marcus Asteniken, without taking his eyes off the apparition. An hour passed until the arrival of the recent imperial vassal at the city. In the meantime, Giovanna isolated herself. It seemed that the darkness had not entirely left her. The guardian did not bother her. Ban Marko Lizic answered the summons, arriving dressed in his golden armor. With him came Gavril in her blood-colored dress, and Marshal Gustavian wearing his armor. The magistrate stared indiscreetly at the newly freed sorcerers with great displeasure. Marshal Gustavian maintained his typically traditionally calm posture. Well, Your Imperial Majesty, I can see beforehand that the stories about your esteemed self are true. You have done the impossible. You have resurrected a ghost from the past, said Marco Lisic, regarding the taciturn guest. She returned his gaze, filled with subtle and dangerous threats. They are very real too, newly elected prince. My terrible punishments for those who behave inappropriately. Forgive me, Your Imperial Majesty. You are forgiven. And now, let's waste no more time. Dushan is dead, and Saista cannot be changed. It is your duty to offer formal and sincere apologies to the sorceress Giovanna Lari. The newly elected prince showed himself to be outraged. Your Imperial Majesty, I never hesitate to apologize when an apology is due. But the prince chose his words carefully. Women. She has caused us destruction, pain, irreparable losses. She betrayed us by omission when she refused to attack the revolutionary forces at the very beginning of the war. We spent the night in semi-darkness, inside the cells of Varhev. No one deserves that fate. But if you are concerned about the intentions of my servant, no longer trouble yourself with doubt. She repented, saw the harm she caused, and knowing she had been wicked, asked me for mercy, and I granted it. I do not like quarrelsome servants. Therefore, I command you to make immediate reconciliation through the simple and noble act of offering sincere apologies in the name of your late uncle. Marco Lisic turned red, as if he were holding back something he really wanted to say. He swallowed his rage, turned to the witch who had been silent until then, and spat out the following words. I forgive her in the name of my entire house, for the love I have for the Vassilian king. Giovanna was pleased to hear those words. It was very pleasant to watch the reluctance of the prince who hated her. The pieces were positioned on the board. The Republican army was situated at the base of Mount Yoden. Above, mounted in battle formation, lay the great Imperial army. The dust was thick, which made it difficult for Sir Lewis to see. However, it didn't take long for him to spot the Imperial crest proudly displayed at the center of the formation. Sir Lewis executed his reading. On the left flank was Steph Boris with his detachments of light cavalry. On the right, Lord Vishkan Ratving marched with the Landsknecht mercenaries. The Landsknecht were experienced warriors, but the conditions of battle meant them dumb victory. The campaign had drained the determination, as well as the goal that had been promised to them. In the center, at the forefront, Kyle Volpking led the heavy infantry divisions. Supported by intelligence work from the Lustava command, they would motivate the men, command them, bring discipline, and provide valuable information amid the chaos. But they could do nothing against the Imperial troops, as that had been agreed upon. In the rear, Sir Lewis commanded 3 divisions of lancers, as well as his own detachment of chevaliers, his personal guard, composed of the most determined Leckerline hearts and also the best equipped. The result of his reading was out of genuine fear. The Imperial army was larger, besides having the advantages of terrain and logistics. Despite everything, Sir Lewis believed in victory. The Chevaliers were covered with the latest plate armor, the same of their horses. In battle, they were resistant to all kinds of lance or sword strikes. He knew he could count on his Chevalier until the end, according to his maxim. By late morning, news of the Hion's fleet's success in engaging and drawing away the Vassilian fleet had reached Sir Lewis. He carefully mapped out every possible detail of his strategy, making countless calculations. By the early afternoon, he assigned a courier to each flank, carrying his instructions as clearly as possible, with orders to advance. And so, the final battle of the great Ruskian Republican Imperial War began. The dust rose, covering the vision of the marching men. Seleucus reached the mansion of the first contact after 20 minutes, which had originated on the left flank with Stephan's Nestrian forces. The Imperial cavalry had made the provocation, and he had responded as the honored tool. That had been the first bad omen. It was not yet time to activate his mounted elite, so he waited at a sufficient distance from the front line to hear reports and give commands. A difficult time had passed. Seleucus could not stay still. He always felt the need to be alongside those fighting for the cause, to inspire them with his majesty. His temples throbbed. His head seemed about to explode from such a headache. Over time, reports of contact came in along the entire line. The dust remained thick, preventing any visibility. The feeling of helplessness seemed to tear him apart. He dismounted and paced anxiously from side to side. Moments later, he demanded that his men bring him detailed reports of each skirmish on the front line. The accounts of heroic deeds that arrived were doubtful, and as far as he could discern, completely fabricated. Time passed and passed, mercilessly. He fiercely demanded his scouts to bring information on where the Imperial banner was. A terrible anguish weighed upon him. The words of Heather, leader of the Lustava, echoed in his mind. He will break your teeth. The rumors about the weakening of the left flank and the growing threat of the already being in a surrounded position weighed even more heavily on him. However, the scouts traveled to him with the information that Captain Jacques's company had sighted the scarlet banner with a bear emblazoned on it, and luck smiled once again on Sir Louis. He doubted at first, but the description of the Varangoy's access left no doubt that the Emperor was indeed there. He ordered one of the men from the Durser company, the name given to Jacques's company, to return and guide the Chevalier where the Imperial standard had been seen. The unpredictability of the war had seized him. Inaction was consuming his peace. No one from the Durser company returned. No one had been seen. The pressure on the flanks was only increasing. He feared that the line might not even exist anymore. A messenger covered in mud returned some time later. He came from the right direction. He brought news of Jacques's death and the slaughter of his company. Sir Louis was not surprised. That was to be expected. After all, it was a battle. Men die all the time, especially when facing the Varangoy head-on. The Generalissimo wished he could count the Varangoy on his side. He decided he had waited long enough. He wanted to act. He summoned Sir Guy de Beclair and Artrand de Reclos and ordered them to accompany him. The captains of his guard had accompanied him since the capture of Leclerc at the very beginning of the revolution. He instructed Sir Arlon, Knight of Keon, to stay close at all times during the assault. He mounted his black steed and addressed his men. Gentlemen, I made you follow me here. Through all my endeavors, I have not seen you flinch a single time. Any day I may have missed when your murmur escapes me. Oh, I would doubt in the slightest the revolutionary anti-monarchical cause. Equality, Our Lady, to whom we have sought to die, guide us in our functional hierarchy. Within the privileges that the Our Lady Equality has granted me, I ask you, not as a general, but as a brother, to follow me, for I will make you right to glory. We will face the worst of our enemies. I assure you that the Emperor lies on that hill. I will kill him. I will sprinkle his blood on the rocks. I will build the temple of my sacred beloved revolution. Behold, the heart of the unfortunate is ripped. Humanity will be freed from the bounds of ignorance and inequality. We will all be like brothers, with our lady equality, our fraternity. I ask you one last time if you accompany me to the attack. All the knights Lecraline shouted from beneath the sallet helmets in unison affirmatively. A brute drove his sword deep into a varangoi. He withdrew it slowly. Blood dripped from the blade. When he caught sight of the Emperor standing before him, his next foe, a surge of euphoria filled him. He swung a wide arching strike, aiming for the left flank. Corpses littered the ground around them, hampering movement, so the Emperor could not dodge in time. He was saved at the very last instant by a guard who thrust his spear into the brute's exposed hand. Blood spurted from the mangled hand, forcing him to drop the sword. The Emperor delivered the final blow to his temple, sending him crashing down. The giant's blood sprayed across the Emperor's face, carrying the sharp metallic tang and veiling his vision in crimson. Another enemy swiftly stepped forward to take up the duel. Clad in chainmail, he bore a round shield and a raven's beak warhammer. Fearless and remarkably agile, he sought every opening and pressed the attack with his hammer. He showed not the slightest intimidation in dueling the Emperor of the Southerners. He struck relentlessly. The Emperor defended as best as he could with a heavy shield. His arm burned. His legs wavered under the weight of the chainmail. After many exchanged blows, the Emperor fared better, piercing the enemy's armpit. With the victory, he had to retreat immediately. He was exhausted. A substitute took his place. Amid the chaos, he tried to find Marcus. He couldn't find him. He was concerned about the state of Gustavin's flank. The gendarmes' assault could happen at any moment. Well, that was exactly how he planned it. He didn't want Sir Louis to escape, as he was a formidable rival, one of the worst he had ever faced. Moreover, he was an ally of the masters of Aloyset, the most powerful of all his enemies, who, given the opportunity, would break any agreement and do everything to ensure the fall of the King of the South. Another chance to corner him would be unparalleled. With his intention, he tightened the Varangoy's line enough to allow Sir Louis and his unfortunate knights to advance. As soon as they entered the Imperial lines, seeking the direct duel against the greatest enemy of the revolution, Gustavin's vanguard's units would close off an escape route for Sir Louis. However, he found the Varangoy's line too thin. Perhaps he had underestimated the enemy's tenacity. He realized he had put himself in a especially risky position. He found Marcus near a destroyed enemy wagon. He instructed him that Sir Louis' offensive was imminent, and that he should organize a lancer line as quickly as possible. Suddenly, from some unknown place in his mind, he recalled the witch's words that she could not be trusted. He looked for her from afar, from the high position where she stood. There she was, like a shadow over a hill of steel and blood. The war horns of the gendarmes immediately grabbed his attention. He urged his Varangoy, "Hold the line! Raise your spears high! Aim the seal at the horses' hearts, for on the ground they are no more than a poorly organized militia. Resist! Hold the line, sons of the cause, for it has been your duty to kill. Kill the murderers of hope, the lackeys of tyranny." He shouted the orders, Heather, leader of the Lustava, to the men of Canendron in the center. The center took on an increasingly sinister appearance as the fear of being surrounded grew. He felt the crushing of will, which haunted the hearts of the warriors. The number of dead and wounded loomed. Shields that dared to approach the front lines were violently broken, followed by the screams of horror from men struck by all kinds of weapons devised by men. Metal struck metal, creating clashes and thunder. Metal struck flesh and bone, creating repulsive horror. Together, they formed the cacophony of battle. Heather noticed that the Imperial attack waves came very well defined, planned, calculated, unbreakable, unstoppable, irreducible waves, no mattering the risk of death. For these were the Raskin warriors under Prince Marco Lisic. These men, unlike the Canendri who made up the Republican vanguard, belonged to the land the fate walked on and where their comrades were being killed. Land on which they had witnessed so much suffering in recent years that, for them, defeat would be nothing less than certain death. For them and their families. They fought fueled by hatred, driven by a hunger for revenge and a thirst for blood, for everything the cause had cost them. At that moment, Heather considered a retreat. Sir Lewis had done that many times, in many scenarios, but this was the first time he had felt fear. Not a stomach flutter or a sudden shiver running down his back, but true fear. Fear of death, what he considered to be the only real fear. He had felt something similar on the mountain a few days ago. The thought of victory had not allowed him to think of anything else in these days. He wondered how far he really was willing to go for it. Now, however, facing the enemy army, he felt only cold. The cold did not follow him for long, as he would soon struck a pikeman right on the head. He noticed that he had been the first of the Lecralines to kill, and this filled him with pride, as he considered it a good omen. With a sword, he killed another enemy. His men followed right behind, spreading death everywhere. Found lying on the ground was Jacques' banner, a lion over a castle. He knew he was in the right place in the battle. His leonine eyes traced the path to his prey, the Imperial bear. He turned to his company. He gazed at the Lecralines in all their power and grandeur, and smiled, for he knew he would win. Suddenly, he remembered who he was. He was the Generalissimo of the Revolution, the captain of the people, the one whose heart was divided among three ladies: victory, revolution, and equality, each responsible for bringing to life the others. The first Lancer unit had advanced. They wished to contest the advance of the Lecrarian cavalry. The Emperor watched the engagement from afar. From the momentum with which the gendarmes fought, he judged his position as euphemistically complex. The gendarmes dug in deeper and deeper, destroying row after row of Contarian lancers. They didn't stand a chance. Sir Lewis had proven to be unstoppable. He gave orders for the Varangoi to form a schiltrum. The shaft of the long spear had broken, giving Sir Lewis the opening he needed to strike and crush the lancer's skull with the pommel of his sword. That was the sixth one today. After him, many more came. Sir Lewis had lost count of how many he had killed. The battle continued, and the Lecrarian knights shattered the Vermont unit and the light infantry of Thessaloginia. Those who survived the massacre fled in deep despair and horror. Nothing could withstand the Lecrarians' revolutionary fury. Sir Lewis, overtaken by the ecstasy of blood, looked around seeking the Usain banner. He carried in his throat the war cry, weaving all his vows of love to his three beloveds, with a special emphasis on the first. He found destiny amidst the mist. He waved defiantly, full of bluster, the yellow banner, imposing, majestic, and glorious, representing everything he coveted, everything he intended to be, but never would be. The ecstasy of blood mingled with the hatred fueled by envy. He fulfilled the destiny's command, and without looking back, not knowing if he was being followed by his men or not, he launched an assault against the source of all his bitterness. They followed him, and the clash was violent. Knights were thrown from the saddles, swords cut men in half, spears tried to pierce the metal plate covering the Lecraline's chest, but found only disappointment. Chaos, the disaster of battle, the cacophony of horrors, hell. Yet, Sir Lewis admired it, for it was the only way to achieve glory. Sir Lewis nurtured a fascination with carnage. He relished it. He considered it his stepping stone to glory. Through the carnage, the Lecralines were winning, with the fearsome Varangoi falling one by one before their revolutionary fury. Victory filled his chest. He could feel the triumph, hear the melodious singing of the nymphs, singing about that immortal day, echoing his name on their beautiful lips, the greatest ever seen among all men. For Sir Guy Beclair, though, regardless of the outcome there, by that point, they would already be lost, and the Heather, along with Illustava, would retreat from the battle. But Sir Lewis cared little. He only wanted to kill. By the gods, how he was good at it. Who was this so-called emperor? Guardian. He hoped he was renowned, so that his glory would be inflated even more. On the left flank, Sir Lewis gathered as many men as he could to deliver the final blow against the Usain banner. They had also suffered heavy losses in attrition. He managed to fight Sir Arthur and Sir Nartran in the midst of chaos. But not Sir Guy. It was all right. This was not the time for grand reunions. He shouted loudly, "Leclerc! For the cause! One last time!" The Varangoi took the shock. The ones closest hit head-on died immediately. Those at the back covered the losses. The knights wore down the brave Varangoi through attrition. Far from being a match for their revolutionary audacity, he saw the Emperor's figure with his own eyes for the first time. He felt an inexplicable and immense desire to kill him. The global flanked the Republican army of Vishken Ratvin, and Stef Boris completely collapsed. The 3-1 numerical disadvantage, combined with the will and tenacity of the Imperial Raskian forces, had brought the Republican army to defeat. Heather, alongside the wise Illustava, resisted by commanding the vanguard for an incredible amount of time. But without support or additional reinforcements, they had to retreat and leave the cause to its own fate. Following the annihilation of his detachment, Stef Boris was captured alive by the Poltari division. Vishken Ratvin was also surrendered, but he had bribed the peasant detachment that captured him, managing to escape. Seeing the total enemy weakness, Stavins ordered an offensive in all directions of the battle. The Cataphract's warriors executed the expected and calculated maneuver, smashing the lesser remnants of resistance in the center from the rear. No escape route remained for the Generalissimo of the Republic. The formation went on and attacked incessantly, like a hammer against the miserable anvil formed by the Imperial scum. However, this time, The Imperials did not yield. Nothing made them retreat. An unexpected messenger had suddenly arrived, coming from the hell of the Central Lines to inform him of the heathen's withdrawal and of the defeat. The messenger cried out the urgency of an immediate retreat, but Seleucus would not back down. Not now, nor ever. For the sake of his three beloved ones, he would go to the very end. The assaults continued, each less effective than the last, with the horses exhausted, and the last of their lacrines falling dead to the ground. A sadistic game of horror, a pendulum of madness, blood, steel, and death everywhere. Suddenly, everything ended when a mysterious magical force cut through the air. It lifted the cavalry into the sky and made them collapse. Everything went dark. At the moment of the fall, the guardian ordered a total charge of Varangoi against the fallen knight. His black steed was atop of him. He couldn't feel the lower part of his body. He felt a warmth accumulating at the back of his head. It ran down his forehead to his chin. With a blurry vision from blood, Seleucus could see, tragically, the last moments of Sir Arthur, who fought with a sword in hand until he bravely fell by the killer axe. In his most miserable state, he admitted to himself, but only for himself, the defeat. He pondered the reason for his fall. The Guardian, as much as had been talking about, could not have done it. No, he hadn't. He spent time thinking until he understood. He couldn't get up, so he somehow crawled, freeing himself from the dying steed. First, he remembered her. Then, he wanted to see her more than anything else in this world. Like a wounded serpent, he passed by his dead companions. He felt the cold steel of their armor. He leaned over a dead companion, whose face he couldn't see, lying covered by the visor. He spotted her. From that distance, it was impossible to see her clearly, but it was certainly her, like an evil shadow at the highest point. He felt no anger, only perplexity. He would be incapable of harboring any lowly feelings towards her. In fact, he suspected that he admired her. He could not feel anger toward Giovanna, a person who had given him all the love in the world, and whom he, in his arrogance, had been deliberately capable of despising, of spitting on. He could never feel anger, for he had not even visited her in her misfortune.